Welcome everybody to Beers with Bill. It's my pleasure tonight to welcome Erin Broadfoot from Little Beast Brewing. I actually, for the first time, have actually written an intro. She's a undergrad of microbiology and chemistry from the University of Toronto, a doctor of naturopathic medicine, a graduate of the Sable Technology Advanced Brewing in Chicago, and the best part that I love about this, a 2018 Tough Mudder competitor. So please, everybody, join me in welcoming Erin. She is a wonderful individual, an accomplished individual, and I am so looking forward to this. Erin, take it away. You want to start right with the beer? We're starting with Moorbach right off the top. And
that's good. You did your research.
Moorbach.
So I live in the middle of nowhere, like literally live in a forest. And of course, my internet is choosing this very moment to be a little bit wobbly. So hopefully it keeps up with us. And I've got a house full of kids and dogs. So I'm hoping I can keep the peace through this. And I apologize in advance for any moments where the peace is not kept. The beer we have here is Moorbach. Moorbach is a Czech style pils. So a lager is something we wanted to do at the brewery for a long time. We're big on kind of waiting, taking things step by step. So it took us a few years to get to this stage, but pretty excited to have this beer now. And it's sold faster than any beer we've ever put on the shelves, which has been really cool to watch. Czech pils is different than your typical German pils in that it's a little softer, a little maltier, slightly different use of hops. A really easy drinking, mellow lagered Pilsner. And we did lager this one traditionally for 6 weeks. So we went all out with it.
Did you bring in water especially for this, or did you use the water at Whitby?
No, we use Whitby water for everything. We don't bring any special water, and we don't strip the water. The only thing we do to the water is, well, we do strip chlorine from it with filters, and we change the water chemistry specifically to every beer style that we make. So every beer that goes through our system, we will look at first exactly how we want it to taste, and then match the water profile and the salt profile to match that. Yep. So, okay. Yeah.
So what hop did you use for the Pilsner? Did you use Noble, the classic hopper, or did you use something else?
Something we drink a lot around my household is Pilsner Urquell. So we did our research and kind of tried to emulate that a little bit. So it's all Noble, it's all Saz, and all Bohemian Pils malts, and then just a really soft water profile to bring out those malts and those Saz hops. And it's hopped at 3 different stages in the boil process.
Wow, that's a lot of work for a Pilsner, isn't it?
It's, you know what though, it's the things I love about simpler beers, or quote unquote simple, is they're actually the beers that require the most attention to detail and you feel the best about when they come out the way you want them.
I hear you on that. They're also the ones where you can't make mistakes because you cannot hide a simple thing in there.
Yes, you can always throw more hops in, but when you can't add anything, you get the very essence shining through.
So you've made a lot of pivots in your journey to becoming a brewer and a brewery owner. But I have a basic question to start with, and that was, when did you know it was time to do your own brewery?
I think when I decided to get into beer, we always kind of knew that my end goal would be to have my own brewery if I was going to stick with beer. It's not the easiest industry to work in, and I came into it a little bit later in life. And I got my feet wet in the industry pretty quickly once I decided it was what I wanted to do. But I always kind of knew that if I was going to be broke and overworked, I wanted to be broke and overworked for myself. So, it was kind of always in the books.
I'm glad you brought that quote up because that was going to be my next question. I love that statement. If I'm going to be broke and overworked, I want to do it just for myself. So.
Yeah. I mean, because it's an unforgiving industry. So.
Oh, very much so. There's a lot of romance around being a brewery owner. People are like, oh, you own a brewery. But then there's the reality, the hard work, the long hours, the lack of pay. Um, what was it like going through the 18 months from the day that you incorporated to the day you finally opened up the brewery?
Yeah, it was a process. I it's so funny. It's so much of a blur to look back on now. It it was a lot of building. I was fortunate enough to be in a spot during the build process where I was consulting for other breweries, which gave me a lot of freedom to kind of do what I needed to do in terms of getting my own brewery off the ground. But it was a lot of moments of moving really fast, followed by long stagnations, and a lot of spending, a lot of money, a lot of money, some crazy moments in there.
Yeah, you guys really got a shock right at the early stages when you found out the gas wasn't enough. How did that transpire?
Yeah, when you start to build a brewery, every time you talk to somebody who owns a brewery, you hear, twice as much time and twice as much money. So I knew what I was getting into, and I kind of knew those moments were coming. But we had everything almost built, and there was one boiler company who wanted us to buy the boiler, and they weren't completely candid when they came out and checked out the site and sold us the boiler. So when we brought in our install, and we'd been told that an install costs, $8,000 to $12,000. I'm like, that's fine. And I worked with a wonderful guy, company that we still work with to this day, that did the install. He walked around the building, and I watched him walk around a few times and look concerned and walk around a few more times. And I knew something was up. And then when he told me I had to sit down before he gave me his report, I knew I was not going to like what I heard. We had the wrong size tubing piping, and we had about 75 there was 75,000 BTU of gas service, and we needed 1 million. So our 12,000 install turned into a $50,000 install in a matter of 30 seconds. It was a it was a kick to the teeth. It hurt.
That's a lot more than expecting things to take twice as long and be twice as much money. That's a lot more.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was a shocker.
Despite the reality of being a brewer, a business owner, and an educator, because as a microbrew owner, you are an educator, I've found that most founders and brewers are passionate about this industry. And my favorite quote from you is, it's a perfect blend of art and science. That's an interesting take. Can you give us a little bit more on that?
Yeah, for sure. My background's in science. I love science. I started zoology university, transitioned microbio and chemistry, came out kind of on the medical side of things. I've always loved the detail orientation of science. I love microscopes. I love everything about it. Um, I also love food, and I love cooking, and I loved baking. I've baked obsessively for years. Anybody who knows me around Christmas knows I come with trays and trays and trays of cookies. And when I discovered beer and brewing beer, I realized that I could take my love for cooking, which to me is art, right? Just a different form of art. It's creativity and flavors, and it's that process that's so similar to that kind of creation, but also kind of go all OCD on the science side and bring in microbiology and chemistry. And it took these two worlds and blended them just beautifully and so perfectly that it kind of filled every single gap that I wanted to fill. And so, yeah, I've always just seen it as this perfect combination of art and science. And it's part of why I love it so much.
Okay.
And no one judges me for being OCD, because being OCD makes good beer.
That's absolutely true. There's so many things that can go wrong in the brewing process. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, for sure. And boy, things have gone wrong in our process. We had some nightmare. Our first 10 batches went down the drain. So it's a journey. So when you make beer, so I tend to kind of ramble on when I explain this sometimes, so I'll try to condense it up. So you start with the mash. So you bring in your water that's augmented with acids and salts and everything else to have that chemical balance that you want. And you put it onto your crushed grains and create what's called the mash. So you bring this together, kind of stir it up. And then it sits for an hour. Your enzymatic reactions occur. The the barley gets all broken up and all the sugars start getting cleaved up. And at the end of that hour, or however long you're leaving it, you're left with what's called wort. So you'll extract the wort from that mash and bring it over into the kettle. You start with a vorloff, unless you're making a hazy beer. But in a vorloff, you're going to recycle that wort through the mash in a cyclical fashion. And what happens is it takes all the proteins and everything else from the bottom, settles them on top of the mash so they don't get transferred to the kettle. And all those nice cut up little barley husks end up sitting at the bottom and create almost like a coffee filter type idea. So you get just the perfect little sugars and flavor compounds going through. You'll transfer that to the kettle, add some additional water. It's called your sparge that comes down and takes out the rest of the sugars. And then in the kettle, you'll boil for anywhere from 15 minutes if you're doing a quick kettle sour to sometimes hours if you're doing, say, a bière de Mars, but typically around an hour. Once that's done, you're going to knock out, which is the cooling process, and transfer it into a fermenter where you add your yeast. Some people will use unitanks, and it's the last place the beer goes before packaging. We let it sit in the fermenter and then transfer to a bright where it clarifies further and where we carbonate. And then depending on which beer it is, we'll take the yeast from the bottom of the fermenter and reuse that yeast for our subsequent batches. For every one batch of beer, we get about 4 more batches worth of yeast. And then we package off of the bright, our fully carbonated final beer off of our super, super non-automatic 4-head manual filler, which takes forever. And the guy who runs it is my hero because he tolerates that machine like a champ.
Yeah, I've been to your brewery twice now, and from a design and architectural perspective, that's a massively intimidating space when you walk in. You get 30-foot ceilings. It's industrial looking. It's in an industrial complex. Yet you've made that space so welcoming and warm. You've got. I noticed things when I walk in. You had games there for people to play. You had non-alcoholic beverages there, so it's really family oriented. I can see that. The tasting area is compressed, so it makes it a lot warmer. When you first walked into that space, was that how you envisioned it?
Yeah, totally. Before I went to open my own brewery, I loved going places where you could see the brew house and you could see the process. For me, that was always part of the fun, and why, like, way back in the day when Bellwoods first opened, I loved to hang out there because I could always see what was going on. So, and I actually really appreciate you saying that, because I think one of my concerns with the brewery has always been, because it is so industrial and in having it so open, things spill and there's noise and all that steel, that I've always been concerned about it being a friendly and warm and welcoming space. And especially because we do really encourage families to come out. I think sometimes around here, we tend to cut children off and expect kids to stay home. And if we want kids to grow up adjusted and able to assimilate, they should be able to come out, and parents should be able to go out and have a beer, and things should be comfortable. And so we've really tried to create a comfortable atmosphere, even though it is super industrial.
You've done a great job with that. My wife is far more into architecture than I am. You get compressed when you come in the door, you get expanded when you come out, and then you get compressed again when you get into the private tasting area, really. So you've done a great job with that. I have to backtrack because I missed a question there. How many times can you use the yeast?
Well, you can use it. It depends on what yeast you're running and how you do it. I mean, granted, they've been using that same yeast for how many years? Maribeth, I think they're on like 400 pitches or something. We usually get 4 to 5 generations. I'm really, really, really tying down our QC right now. So we do micro testing on each successive generation. And the second we see anything that's not perfectly where we want it to be, we scrap it. So I would say right now we're only getting 3-4 generations in, and that is only because we run so many different types of yeast in-house, and we're hoping to bring in more, which is probably the worst idea, but it's why I do this. So yeah, we're pretty picky about our yeast.
I'm going to get into this a little bit further about the style of beer that you like to do, but doing saisons, you with the lactobacillus in there, you really have to be careful. How do you make sure you don't contaminate the yeast?
The saisons, my favorite thing in the world. I have moments because today we had to pitch a batch because I pulled diastatic out of an English strain that shouldn't be there, and I said to one of my team members that I was going to go all saison so we don't have to worry anymore because that yeast is such a jerk. But I don't think we actually would ever go all saison. But I love that style of beer so much. I would never let it go. So it's completely worth the headache of trying to use separate tanks and separate hoses and separate gaskets and try to chase it back into its spot.
Well, because I've worked with Shortfinger in Waterloo, and that's the one thing he does, open fermentation. You can't even avoid it now, but we constantly having to remember those ones were used for this and these ones were used for that all the time. So that's good as you. What's the second beer we're going to try tonight?
That would be Pinion. So Pinion, whoop, this guy right here. So this is a super old school pale ale. We do a couple old schools and a couple hazies. This one is a little bit more old school, pours a little bit more clear, more sulfites in the water chemistry. So you get a little bit more of a minerally crispy bite and you get a little bit more hop than malt accentuation. None of our beers are typically perfectly clear because we don't filter. So Pinion is done with a combination of hops, Nelson, Sriracha, a little tiny bit of Cascade in the boil, and then the dry hop is Nelson, Sriracha, and Citra. So Nelson is my favorite hop, and no word of a lie, the most expensive hop in the entire market. So of course it's my favorite hop. But Sriracha is a really neat hop, and if you use it right, it's great. And if you use it wrong, it's absolutely disgusting. You can pull notes of dill pickle and almost like butter, not diacetyl butter, but a different kind of butter out of that beer, and that is Sriracha. So it's a really neat hop, whereas Nelson's a little bit more dank and a little bit more pithy and it's got some Chardonnay notes in it. So yeah, it's every brewery I've ever worked at, Sriracha has followed me. So. I love the dill.
That is an interesting combination.
Yeah, they work really, Nelson and Sriracha work really, really well together. But Nelson is a great hop to work with. We use it in one of our IPAs, Salem's Lot, though that beer's getting a bit of a makeover this week, so it may evolve a bit. And really good friends. One of my favorite saisons that we do at the brewery, it's a collab we do with Ren Navarro and Robin LeBlanc. Every 3-4 months is all Nelson, and it's a gorgeous beer.
So I started out by asking the question originally this way, and that is a lot of things have happened in the last 10 months, but you've had a lot of things happen over the last 5 years. How do you stay grounded?
Yeah, I don't know if grounded or balanced is the right word to describe me ever. I tend to be very passionate and get carried away easily. And I don't know, 5 years ago or so, I kind of made this conscious choice, maybe longer, 2013 or so, it's like 7 years ago. How are the years are going? This conscious choice to just do whatever put me out of my comfort zone and try new things. And, to an extent, if it seems like a bad idea, but I want you to just jump on and just go for it. So I don't know. I think I stay grounded by putting myself in check once in a while. Running, literally running. I run away from problems once a day. I run a lot. And it kind of rebalances me. And it's almost like my time to meditate, music, those little moments in my family, my kids, my husband, the people who are close to me that, bring me back down to earth when it's time for me to settle a little bit again.
So what's been the biggest challenge from COVID for you?
There's been a few. I think this idea of constantly pivoting has been very romanticized, and I'm very tired of it. Um, just trying to keep, the finances in check. There is this idea that went around that it was great for us because everybody's ordering bottles, and well, the local support has been incredible, and local drawback and that growth has been amazing through COVID, and that's been a real bright side of this whole situation. Cost of production without kegs, without tap room, without everything skyrockets. It's been very hard to keep our profit margins balanced and to just feel safe and secure. So yeah, and we're a food and beverage business that was 3 years running when COVID hit. So we are kind of right at that spot where we were starting to breathe. So it was a bit of a kick in the back of the knees when this hit. But we'll get through it. We'll be here on the other side, and we'll be bigger and better after. So
What's been the best change, whether in your organization or in the industry as a whole, because COVID happened?
I think seeing more local support, watching people really jump to it, word of mouth, people trying to really, this whole new focus on local has been amazing. I think a lot of people in our neighborhood that didn't know we were there before found us because people were making that extra effort to try to support the community businesses. And I think that'll be huge after this. It was also a really good chance in a really weird way to slow down and be able to take stock of what was important to us and what wasn't, which business decisions we were making that maybe actually weren't very good for us, and how we can regroup post COVID to do better and to grow from it. So it's all about learning, right? There's always a lesson. And so that's kind of the take home. And I've seen a ton of my kids because I'm homeschooling them at the brewery. So that's time you can never get that back. So it's good.
Now that I find intriguing, homeschooling them at the brewery. So are
Yeah.
they helping you brew beer as well?
They'll help me fill boxes, and they like turning valves sometimes. My middle child, one of my daughter, Rue, she swears she's gonna run the place one day. So she'll follow me around and try to watch the processes and likes to play with the microscope. So I told her only if it's really making money, and if it is, then she can have it one day.
Well, that must be sort of heartwarming at the same time for you.
Yeah, no, it's nice. I mean, owning your own business, it's scary. It's, your family's entire future is tied up in this thing, but there's also a lot of privilege in that you can have your family there and you can have your kids there, and it's something to give them if it works out. And there's a lot of benefit to it that I didn't even realize was going to be there until it was in my face.
Well, that's nice. I like that. I like that idea that they're there. They actually get to see what you do,
Yeah.
appreciate. They're getting an education that they wouldn't normally get, which is to understand how a business functions. And
Yeah. And sorry.
because you probably have to be careful what you say occasionally when things go wrong.
Yeah, I'm not real good at censoring myself. So I figure they hear worse on the school bus anyways, and it's all about learning about the realities of life, right? So
So what do you see that's new and exciting in the craft beer industry right now?
there's a lot. I mean, I think it depends on where you look and what you love too. I mean, my big thing every year was going to Montreal once a year. With my love of saisons and Belgians, that's in Canada, that's where you got so much of it. And I really missed my yearly, me and my husband once a year would go out for 4 days and go through all of our favorite places out there and see what everybody was doing. So I'm missing that this year. But I've had some pretty amazing local stuff. There was a beer de garde that came out of Sawdust this summer that was like phenomenally good. It's fun watching people doing things that I would never do. We had Third Moon in the brewery a few weeks ago, and like they're doing a completely different approach that with their slushies and the hazy beers. And it was really cool to talk to a brewery that's kind of riding that hype train and doing it completely differently than us, and to learn a little bit from them and try what they're doing. And those slushy sours, I would never do it, but they're phenomenal. So they're worth the dollars, those cans. yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out there, and it's just fun watching everybody grow and build.
I have to ask it. Where's your favorite place in Montreal?
Hopfenstark, station host. So Boisson de Higgs is, I don't speak French, so that's me attempting it if anybody else here does, because I have a terrible French accent. It's a brewery that did almost exclusively saisons, and that was kind of my coming to moment. Dunham, they do, their saisons are like, give me goosebumps. They're so good. There's a lot of great places out there. And even out here, like Block 3, I love what Kevin's doing out there. He does a lot of really great Belgians and stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of really good stuff.
Okay. You just recently announced relationship with Third Moon, that you were carrying some of their beers, they were going to carry some of your beers. How did that all come about?
It was for one day, so it was a pre-order, and they brought the pre-orders to our brewery, and we're going to do the same. The gentleman who built our brewery built their brewery too, Mr. Rob Carefoot. Amazing, amazing man. If anybody's ever building a brewery, I highly suggest you talk to him. Really good person, really quality work. And Rob's just always been really good to, yes, Rob Carefoot. And Rob's been really good to us and really good to Third Moon. And he got me and Bebo chatting. And yeah, Rob helped set this up, and he was the glue for us. And it was a lot of fun. So, and I finally got to try some Third Moon beer, because holy moly, they are everywhere right now. It's been crazy watching them take off. So, and that marshmallow porter was good.
They're going to be on the show in a couple of weeks.
Oh, sweet. That's very cool.
Yeah,
Good.
that's good. But it sounds like I should have Rob on the show sometime too.
Oh, Rob's great. And he's a super amazing personality and great to talk to. And yeah, probably the entire time I've been in the industry, one of the people who has been best to me and has always had my back. So
that's great to hear. That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the craft beer industry has so many amazing people in it. So
yeah, I think so too. It's a pretty cool industry.
yeah. So what's next for Little Beast?
Getting through COVID, and then after we get through COVID, I'm kind of looking at the year ahead and deciding how to refine the beers, and deciding what we want to do next. More Belgians coming in. I'm going to experiment with some yeasts, hoping to grow that barrel program a little bit more again. And hopefully bringing in Brett. But there's a couple of little things I have to solve first, but I'm really hoping that this is the year we launch our mixed fermentation program.
You're really into the barrel aging part.
Mm-hmm.
Where did that, what's the inspiration for that?
Well, that's when I said I wanted to open a brewery. It was because I wanted to make saisons and barrel-aged saisons and work with mostly wine barrels. There just was never enough of them around Ontario, and I'm very picky about saisons. Like the Duchess, which is, I can't watch reviews for that beer anymore. It is by far my favorite beer, and people just kill it for being too simple. But it's, you know, it's what a saison is supposed to be, and I so just love that style of beer. And before we opened, I had 20 different kegs of that beer in my basement that everybody else thought tasted exactly the same, but I could taste the difference between each of those saisons. And yeah, and barrels, you can do so much with barrels, and the funk and just the different alcohol notes you can bring in, and the oak, and there's just something to the blending and the growing and the sitting, and that's where the art comes in, right? The creativity in there. So it's kind of just what I've always really wanted to do. It's just very expensive to start.
Barrel aging beers is not a cheap undertaking in any stretch of the imagination. Right from the cost of the barrels to the length of time you have to have your product sitting. And
Yeah,
all the issues of what can go wrong.
Oh yeah, there's been a bit of that. We're about to chuck 4 more barrels. Every once in a while, it doesn't go the way you want it to, and that's just part of it. So
yeah, that is the trials and tribulations in the craft beer industry. Which one are we doing next?
Next would be, oh, I'm gonna have to grab it from the fridge. The next one would be Saison d'été. My husband's gonna be really nice and grab it for me.
Oh, that's cool.
Saison d'été. He gets to drink half of it, so he's not complaining, right? This was a beer that was directly inspired by one of our trips to Montreal. It's a dry hop saison. Actually, there's some Nelson in this guy too. Nelson Mosaic and Idaho 7. Light on the bittering, sulfate heavy, crisp, minerally, and then a big, huge hit of dry hop in the finish. So you get that nice, clear saison in the background, and then big, spiky, juicy, spicy hops come out off the nose. The beauty about dry hop saisons or anything with a diastatic yeast is it works differently with the hops. And it's part of the reason I don't like to date code my saisons is people see like Ete, which is hoppy, but has been sitting for 6 months. And they assume that because normally you don't want a hoppy beer that's been sitting that long. But this is actually a beer that evolves really, really, really well. And partly it's because of the interaction between that diastatic yeast and the hop compounds and what they do to those hops over time. So we purposefully brew a giant batch of this beer so that it will last 6 to 8 months, because I love the evolution in this beer. And then you get a different beer every couple months, which is kind of neat. Like now it's starting to really mellow. It's not nearly as spicy as it was 2 months ago. That's what I love about this. And Dunham had done a hop saison that I drank a whole ton of one year in Montreal and came back, and that's when I wrote this recipe. So.
I've got to skip to a couple questions over in the chat line. Is there a theme behind the saisons you name?
No, not really. When we started, we had the 4 seasonal saisons because I wasn't sure how they would take off. When we opened in Durham, people would come and be like, "What's a saison? Oh, do you have something hoppy?" And like I couldn't sell the things. I was like, "Oh God!" I thought I bankrupted myself from the opening day. I was a little concerned. So I had the seasonal ones. So even though they're set up by season, they're not connected. And now that I have more freedom because people are now coming to us for this style of beer in particular, they're going to grow. And I'm launching 2 or 3 new saisons, I'm hoping, over the next few months. So there's going to be lots more. And they're just kind of wherever creativity takes me. So it's the fun of it.
Without getting into the personal level, what would be the cost of starting a microbrew today? Any sort of ballpark?
I see. I have an open book. I'm happy to go buy. I've opened my financials for people that are doing this, right? You go in knowing the cost of opening a brewery. I bet you to open a brewery that's the size of Little Beasts today, you'd be looking at $750,000. I bet you a brew house, fermenters, depending on where you go. I mean, the quotes vary wildly depending on who you go to, but a brew house, 10-hect brew house, 4 fermenters, 2 bright tanks is probably, I'm gonna guess, gonna run you about $300K or so. But it's the electrical, the gas, it's all those little things you don't think of, and that's where the cost comes in. And being ready to work. I mean, situations come and go, but since December 3rd, it's kind of become a running joke. I've had 3 days that I've worked less than 10 hours. So, you go through bits and spurts where it's the money, and then it's also just how long can you stand for?
Well, thank you. I was reading the chat line there. The one person, twice as much money as you intended to spend.
Yeah.
That's
yeah, I'm scared to touch buttons. I can see the beginning of the question coming up. Yeah, always more money.
Yeah.
RSP will get you half a tank. Yeah, about that. They come up down here.
So how do you decide what to brew? Because you've done a lot of different styles now.
Yeah, so we kind of came in with an idea of what was going to be our set brands. And I think now I know what works for us. So I know which beers have to be in the schedule. And then you know what your barrel fill program is going to be. So you know how to work those beers in. And now I'm kind of just taking passion projects and trying to figure out where to work them in. So there's only so much room for new once people start coming back for what they know. But yeah, I think I've got brews scheduled out until March now. So it's been very structured so that I can bring in some new stuff and have some fun with it.
So how do you decide on what you're going to do for new stuff?
It's a mix. Well, I mean, to some extent, it's what is going to sell, but I don't know if I'm always the smartest that way, where I'm trying to take some faith in what I think I do well and hoping I can push that on the market. I'm about to do a few smoked beers, so we'll see how that goes. I feel like it's going to be like starting with saisons all over again. But it's something I think I do well, but you never know until you do it on a big scale and see how it's received, right? And more Belgian IPAs in the future, I think, too.
I've got to see where I am on my list here.
No
I'll go with
worries.
an easy. I'm going to go with an easy one. What's your favorite style of music?
Music is my life. Music, ironically, is kind of when I was younger, the career that I was supposed to take and where everybody thought I was going to go. And then I couldn't handle the pressure of that and completely backpedaled. I love metal, really heavy metal. I listen to a lot of metal. It calms me down and makes me smile. My tap room usually runs 90s tunes because I am that person. I said I wouldn't be that person that got stuck in my generation. And I'm right, I'm still there. So, and it's a little bit more user friendly, like a lot of punk, especially femme punk. I love woman-led punk. The Kills, I've had the Kills on the playlist nonstop for the last 3 weeks. So yeah, kind of depends on my mood, but lots of heavy stuff.
So did you sing or did you play a musical instrument?
Played a lot. I still play piano. I have my piano is right next to me here. I played guitar and sang in a band. I've played clarinet, trumpet, French horn, oboe. I love music's like therapy, but it turns out I don't like people watching me play music. So it doesn't work so well when you're on a stage.
Put a little curtain up and a monitor now so you can see the conductor, you can hide, no one will know you're there.
I'm happy to keep my music personal and put my beer out front. So
did you play in a punk band?
Yeah, for a short period of time when I was in high school, I played in an all-female punk band. And then briefly in my 20s, I tried again. And I have a lot of friends in the music scene that are still trying to make it. And I watched and I thought, I can't do this. I can't struggle for the rest of my life. I'd like to make money. So I opened a brewery.
Yeah, how's that working for you? Yeah.
I'm happy. That's all that matters.
So for the rest of you who have been longtime members of Beers with Bill, we now have another member for Nick Baird and Keith Carmen's punk group.
There you go.
What's next for Erin?
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot going on right now. I think just keeping this brewery going and trying to continue to advocate and speak. Before COVID, I was given a lot of opportunities to speak within the industry. I have strong feelings about diversity and inclusion and representation. We do a lot of community-led initiatives at the brewery, so I really look forward to continuing that. And we've made new commitments this year to what we want to do in terms of our community-led initiatives. I was one of the general managers for PFLAG Durham Region for years. I've stepped back because they've got new managers and the team is working together amazingly, and I'm looking at new opportunities now. But yeah, trying to find my new footing in the volunteer world and to find new goals running and beering and everything else and just keep moving forward.
Who does the artwork for you?
And be the gentleman sitting right over there in the corner. That's my husband, Kier. He does all of our artwork. So very talented guy.
I am constantly intrigued because when I was in the first time, I bought all 12 or actually 11 beers then plus an extra IPA, and I was just amazed with the artwork. So
yeah, he does. I think it's kind of neat. His backgrounds, he has degrees in fine art. He does a lot of animation, a lot of cartooning. He really has his own style, but I think he kind of came at it a different way because his background is in fine art and not necessarily graphic design, that every label became an art piece. And I watch him here whenever he's drawing a label or painting a label, swearing and junking stuff and saying forget it, just the same way that I try to dump beers and don't like anything that I make, and get a bunch of artists working together trying to create a project, and it can be a process.
okay. Who's your role model?
My role model.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. It's funny, it's a question I actually think about a lot. And I don't know if I have like specific large role models more than little pieces of so many people in my life. My best friend, Yvonne, who's just constantly busting ass like nobody I know. Ren, who continues to fight no matter what is dealt her way with the crap that goes on in the beer world. Another one of my girlfriends that is doing everything on her own now with her twin boys and has moved halfway across Ontario. And I see a lot of stuff in all the people that I know and carry, I think, little bits of all of that forward with me. With that, my coach, she's this tiny little 5'0" redheaded little spitfire that'll plow through anything, and watching what she's done with her life after every setback has been, I feel like no matter what happens to me, I just need to get up and keep going because I've seen what she's done. And yeah, the little things like that.
You competed in Tough Mudder in 2018. What was that like?
That was the big one. I'm a Tough Mudder ambassador, super cheesy. I love OCR. I love ultra endurance. The 2018, I did 2017 World's Toughest in 2018. 2017 was in Vegas. 2018 was in Atlanta. 24 hours, 3 water submersions every 5-mile lap in -3-degree weather. It was hell. It was awful, but I did it, and I did well. I think I was 14th woman overall or something. It was a very cool experience, if a little painful. I was fully hallucinating that last lap, so it was an experience.
Talk to me about Odin.
Odin, okay. Odin is, yeah, you grab Odin. So Odin is our first beer aged in red wine barrels. So it was aged in Cab Sauv barrels. It's an Imperial Saison. It's kind of like the big sister to Saison d'Automne. So it's a big, huge Saison with a little bit of Vienna to carry it through because it is bigger. It was fermented with boysenberries, pardon me, which on the label for Automne it just said berry, because whenever BC runs into big problems with forest fires, we have problems getting our boysenberries. So after it ferments with the boysenberries, it sits in Cab Sauv barrels. For this one's a first run, so about 4 months. And then this is what comes out. And this was the first time we ever did this beer. So it was exciting. We now have Fenris is now sitting in the barrels that this one came out of. So it'll be the second generation after this beer. Big berry notes. I always say it's like grape and berries and juice. And 10%. It's well hidden. The day we were packaging this beer, this would have been, I guess, a few months into the COVID scare, and I got the regular flu. But the second that you have symptoms, I stayed home. I wasn't going to go anywhere near the brewery till I had a negative test, which I did have. But I needed to know that the packaging run went well. So they dropped off bottles from each point of the packaging run for me. And there I am sitting at home on flu meds, drinking Odin. And by the time I was done, I think I drank 2.5 bottles. Like the hangover was worse than the flu for like 2 days. Beer will sneak up on you. It drinks easy.
This is a little too smooth and easy for a 10% beer.
If you treat yeast really well, it hides the alcohol for you. You just have to nurture the yeast. That's where our name comes from, the little beasts.
Tell me about the Beer Ladies of Durham. You're a founding member.
Yeah, that was a while back. Like I said, I've always loved doing advocacy work. And I mean, beer's getting better in terms of women. There's more women in it, still not a whole ton on the production side. Now we just need to address the issues we have when it comes to bringing in BIPOC peoples and LGBTQ. But that aside, yeah, so when I started in the beer industry in Durham, the Society of Beer Drinking Ladies was just taking off. And I spoke to them and I was like, can we do this out here too? And they're like, sure. So we were briefly the Society of Beer Drinking Ladies in Durham. And then that organization went nuts. So I was like, how about I just back off and leave that to you guys, and we changed it to the Beer Ladies of Durham. And then when I opened a brewery, I passed it off to a few other women to take over, just because they're like less biased, completely open out there. And it's since fallen by the wayside, I think, but it was a really nice way to bring together the women in the community for a while.
What's it like? You weren't prepped for this one, so you can take it.
I don't need to be prepped. I barely look, trust me. I prefer to go off the cuff, more natural.
What's it like being female in a white male dominated industry?
Yeah, there's experiences. I think, I've always been one of the boys, and most of the dudes in the industry are great, and I have a lot of fun and I feel completely comfortable. But I'd be lying if I said it was easy and there weren't huge issues. I've faced massive issues with sexism in jobs. I had a job interview once for a head brewer position, and I never wear rings because when you work around machinery, you risk getting your fingers ripped off. And when he realized that I wasn't wearing a ring because of that, he canceled the interview because he never intended to hire me. He was just looking for a date. I've definitely, there's been those moments working places where if a guy doesn't know how to use a tool, it's funny and everybody laughs and says, here. And when a girl doesn't, somebody shakes their head and goes, this is why I didn't want the girl on my team. So there's definitely still issues, and that's fine. I'm loud and I'm not shy, and I have no problems being one of the people that will step up and speak up and help make that go away. So, and I've been pretty fortunate to have been given a role in this industry where I get to speak and get to I've had a lot of women I've gotten to work with coming into the industry that I've been able to help, and that's been amazing. So yeah, there's definitely challenges that come with it. Sorry, that's my dog, Loki. The West Highland Terrier. He likes to talk.
Yes.
So yeah.
Now, I find that the craft beer industry in and around the KW areas very supportive of each other. How do you find it out your way?
The same. I find for the most part, breweries are very supportive. Everybody's very collaborative. Having more breweries in an area makes it more of a destination so that more people are likely to go to that area. So I find the industry is great, and there's so many great people out here. So that's the nicest part about it. I see that Westies are awesome. We have a Dane too. So you have the big and anyways.
Looking through the lens of COVID, what do you think is the number one thing that breweries should be doing more of right now?
Through the lens of COVID.
Yeah.
Lobbying to have our taxes reduced. The AGC, oh man. I think deliveries, more personable service, door to door, those types of things. That's kind of what we've been doing. We're a little under on manpower right now, so we haven't been doing as many traveling deliveries, but we're hoping to really bring that back soon. And that's been a huge one for breweries, I think.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Oh, I got to get this one. Someone wants to know if you listen to Jory Nash.
I know the name. It's not, I'm terrible with names. And I don't off the side. I'd have to look it up.
Okay, well, we can discuss that a little bit further when we go off the record when I stop recording.
Okay. Okay.
So Heather, you can enlighten her at that point. If you could travel back in time, Erin, what would be the one single piece of advice you would give your younger self?
I don't think too much because I think the journey is part of the process. But if I was going to say anything, it'd probably to tell myself that it's okay if not everybody likes you. It took me a while to realize being in this industry and sticking up for myself, and not putting up with crap, and becoming a vocal person in terms of diversity work and inclusion speaks, that some people don't like it. And at first it scared me off of it, but I've learned that it doesn't matter. So that and that imposter syndrome is a very, very real thing. Any podcast that talks about imposter syndrome right now is my thing. It is a very real thing. And I don't think we talk about it enough to people who are establishing themselves and finding their careers and moving forward, and men too, but I think especially women right now. So yeah.
Shrug's asking an interesting question. He wants to leave it for later, but I think right now, what's the one risk you think you're going to take this year to brewery?
To start making some of the stuff that I really love. We're hoping to bring my husband in full time, so there's a risk putting the whole family stocks into one bag, and to really push and make this a feasible forward venture.
Yeah. Okay. What's the one thing you'd like everybody to take away from this chat tonight?
So I think I'd give the deep level and the light level. So the deep level, to speak up, to listen to other voices, to listen to minority voices, to not lose sight of everything that's happened in the world this year and the forward progress we need to make, and to be part of that change that needs to happen. Listen to people like Ren, listen to people like Robin, and really hear what they have to say. And then outside of that, on the lighter side, I think to remember that there is a heart behind those beers that are made. I love constructive criticism. That's a wonderful thing. But man, sometimes people can be mean, and that no matter what that beer is, there's somebody behind that beer that loves that beer and loves what they're doing. So yeah.
Erin, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and busy life and away from your family to spend time with us. This has been wonderful and fantastic. And truly appreciate hearing your story, and really enjoyed having that short little time last Wednesday when you and I could chat social distance at the brewery while you were brewing.
Yes, sir. That was the day after I'd rebuilt our system too. I was a disaster, man. That was such a mess. I appreciated your patience with me.
Like I said, I've done some collaborative beers. I totally understand what goes on in that whole process. For those of you who have joined in from Erin's social media, I have wiped out your emails that I've gotten from my system. So if you do want to receive any upcoming things, Beers with Bill, please email me at bill@kickoffannex.ca, and I will put you on the mailing list. I don't do that automatically. I need people to request that. Next week, Brett Taylor. He's a former resident in Kitchener-Waterloo, a brewer and barrel manager from Block 3, recently at the Indie Ale House. He's going to be joining us and having a conversation. And the following week, Remy, our Mark Agnon over there in the corner, or whoever is on your screen, will be joining us the following week. And Erin, again, thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate
no.
you taking time.
This is the fun part, right? Like, I love making beer and I like playing with tri-clamps, but it's fun to connect with people, and it's the best part of what I get to do. So yeah, thank you for having me on.